Joining us now is Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney. Mike, good to see you again.
Hey, Gerard. Great to see you, too.
All right, so we got President Donald Trump is under the microscope, in the crosshairs, shall we say, of New York City DA Alvin Bragg. He's just bound and determined to get the photo op of Trump in an orange jumpsuit with handcuffs on.
I think the artificial intelligence has beat him to it. So.
That's right. I've seen some of that too. So honestly, counselor, for us lay people, non-lawyers out there, I ain't really exactly sure what the law that's broken is here. Can you explain that?
Well, what's being reported in the press is that the Manhattan District Attorney is looking at charging Trump with falsifying business records, second degree, in New York state law. And basically what that is a misdemeanor.
Okay.
It means a misdemeanor is something that is a crime, but it's not punishable by more than 1 year in prison. So we're not even talking about a felony count. And what has been reported in the press is that if the DA can find evidence to support a felony count, it would have to be a felony related to that falsification of business records, i.e., it would have to involve another felony. So what they're saying is based, and what the press is saying is most of all of this is based upon Trump's now disgraced, felony convicted, prison-serving former personal attorney, Michael Cohen. If you remember, he was convicted of multiple counts. I think it was like 8 counts of violating, illegal campaign contributions, evading personal income taxes, and making false statements to banks. And he served prison time for that. But from what the press has been reporting, he has been interviewed by the Manhattan District Attorney more than something like 27 times about this incident. And
habitual liar.
Well, yeah, and that as a prosecutor, obviously we do sometimes have to use individuals who've been convicted of crimes to move up the chain, move up the hierarchy. But in this case, the problem is I think it was just this past week, the grand jury in New York heard from Michael Cohen's former attorney.
Right.
And his former attorney, according to him, he told the grand jury that Michael Cohen told his attorney that, no, this was something Cohen did on his own to protect Melania Trump from knowing about the affair, and he did it without any knowledge of Trump.
Okay.
So when you have the guy's former attorney telling the grand jury that, and you got the guy, Michael Cohen, telling the grand jury one thing, I mean, that's a lot of reasonable doubt that has to be considered. Now, just so your listeners know, all that a grand jury has to have is probable cause, 51%, to believe that a crime has been committed in order to return an indictment.
Okay.
Once you get to trial, the prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay.
But
different standard.
That's why you hear the old cliche, you can prosecute a ham sandwich because it has to only be probable cause.
Okay.
So I think that's the real concern here is if the Manhattan District Attorney moves forward with this, does not have the evidence, does not have the credible witnesses, does not have what he needs to get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt, what hell is he going to release on this country by indicting the first ever indictment of a former United States president?
Do you believe that Cohen's attorney's testimony is really what caused them to decide not to meet?
It's questionable. I believe he testified it earlier this week. By all indications, the media thought that the indictment was going to come down Wednesday. They were scheduled to meet yesterday, Thursday, and it was called off. And then apparently the grand jury does not meet on Friday. So it could have been that. There were press reports that Michael Cohen was on standby to be called back to the grand jury after his attorney basically contradicted everything he said. But he was not. He was not called back. He was not brought back to the grand jury to testify. Gerard, I think maybe what is happening here is, and I don't have any insider information, but the New York Police Department, law enforcement in the city of New York, they probably realize with all the bombastic statements the president's been making about protesting and about standing up and just getting out, they probably worried about the response that this might engender in the city of New York, and probably trying to get their ducks in a row, whatever they need to take in order to make sure the city is secure. That's what I think.
Well, the New York Post published a rather scathing article concerning D.A. Bragg. Said, fumbling his Trump case, Alvin Bragg exposes his incompetence nationwide. And what's a head-scratcher here, Mike, is that it was in 22, right, when the DE said there's nothing here and we're not going forward with this case.
Well, and I think the Wall Street Journal did a good editorial on this. It's really, you really have to question where he's going with this, because let me back up for a few things. One, D.A. Bragg is a progressive prosecutor. He campaigned on the idea of we need to stop prosecuting nonviolent crime. What are we talking about, Gerard? We're talking about a misdemeanor falsifying a business record. If there was ever a nonviolent crime, it's that. So that's number one. Number two is in the last year, in 2022, overall violent crime in the city of New York increased by almost 25%. Overall violent crime. So why in the heck is the DA going after a misdemeanor falsification of business records when he's got an almost 25% increase in violent crime in his city? That makes absolutely no sense. And the third thing is, here, in order to get a felony, not only does he have to prove falsification of business records, he has to prove intent on Trump's part to do that in furtherance of another crime. In this case, it would probably be something like, federal campaign finance laws. The problem with that is the federal prosecutors have already passed on that.
That's what I thought.
And we're now, here we are 7 years, 7 years after the alleged crime has occurred, and this progressive prosecutor in New York is seeking to bring a misdemeanor charge against a former United States president.
Well, it's another blatant example of weaponization of government for political gain. I mean, we're seeing that quite a bit of late, and this really, I think, shows it in full light, honestly, in this case.
It reminds me when when Attorney General back in I think it was the early 40s, spoke to a group of United States attorneys. It was like the second convening of this group of United States attorneys. In his speech, he said, the greatest, the most powerful peacetime force that we in this country know are prosecutors.
Huh.
And so, I mean, think about it. I mean, prosecutors hold in the balance individuals' liberty or freedom.
True.
And for so long, we have respected those opinions. We've respected that discretion. We've respected people who put in those positions to make the right calls and make the right decisions. And in this case, to your point, I think one of the Trump spokespeople said, this is the weaponization of the injustice system. When you have someone who is doing something clearly for political reasons, I don't know if it's just for political reasons, it's, as you said earlier, for fame, for glory, for whatever. But he's getting a lot of pushback. He had two prosecutors in his office quit because he did not bring an indictment against Trump relating to the previous prosecution of Trump Organization. And so, is that what's pressuring him? One of his prosecutors, I hear, wrote a book about all of this that's come out. And so is he getting pressure not only from the extreme left, but it seems like he's getting a lot of pressure from the media to do this as well.
Yeah, even they're calling him out.
Absolutely.
And some Democrats as well. And New York, Mike, is not unique in this situation. Of course, you're familiar with, his name escapes me, the individual in Los Angeles that just seems hell-bent on not prosecuting anybody that commits some of these crimes, and their cities are unsafe as a result.
You can go on social media almost every single day and see videos of just complete chaos, rampant criminal behavior, and especially in the big cities that you mentioned where these progressive prosecutors said anything under $1,000, anything that is quote unquote nonviolent crime. If you stick to that, you're not going to have any businesses in any areas. You're not going to have any law-abiding citizens wanting to live in those areas. I mean, it's just the continual downgrade of our civilized society to allow law to be broken and there to be no consequences.
George Gascon, his name occurred to me. So can you hang around for
Absolutely.
another segment? Yeah, we'll talk some more. We've got Mike Hurst, former U.S. Attorney in the Element Well Studios, and we're coming right back. Mike Hurst is our guest, former U.S. Attorney. We've been chatting about this possible Trump indictment. The jury is still out, no pun intended, but it's Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg that is in hot pursuit of the former president, looking to make a big old name for himself. I don't think it's going to stop until he's got Trump in an orange jumpsuit handcuffed. But Donald Trump, of course, not one to lay low whenever he's being attacked.
No, that's definitely not his middle name, laying low, Trump.
So this morning, I think it just happened. It may have been late yesterday. He posted on Truth Social, his social media platform, a photo of him, kind of a split screen photo, which shows Donald Trump in one of the images holding a baseball bat with his eyes kind of pointed over, cut over to another photo right next to it on the right of Alvin Bragg. And it almost as if he's making like a physical threat. And he goes on to post, what kind of person can change another person, in this case a former president, charge another person who got more votes than any sitting president in history, et cetera, et cetera. So he says no crime has been committed, and also he should keep in mind the potential death and destruction that could occur on the heels of such a false charge. It could be catastrophic for our country.
I think that's the real concern. I mean, the photos, obviously, hyperbolic, but the concern is that the reference to death and destruction that could occur. I read, I think it was in that Wall Street Journal editorial, why do this? These are unforced errors in the Journal's opinion on Trump's part, because what happens is if this indictment comes out, there are protests, those protests turn into riots. Those riots turn into real violence. Those real violence turn into, as he said, death and destruction. Then that is laid at the feet of Donald Trump.
Would that be incitement?
Well, it could be. I mean, with this Manhattan District Attorney, absolutely it could be.
Okay.
But, there have been questions. I've seen some legal commentators in the media talking about this could be considered not only threats against the Manhattan District Attorney himself, but it also could be considered obstruction of justice with regard to a grand jury investigation. So,
I can see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, as a federal prosecutor, I charged obstruction of justice. It was much more than this, but at the same time, there's so much wiggle room. And again, I get back to the fact that all you have to show to a grand jury to get an indictment is probable cause. And many of your listeners may not know this, but in the grand jury, there's only one side. In the grand jury, there is the prosecutor, and there's no defense counsel.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
sense.
what the grand
they
jury
just lay the case out.
What the grand jury receives are the charges, the elements that support that charge, and the evidence that supports the elements to support the charge.
Okay.
So that's what the grand jury receives, and the grand jury is the ultimate decider. But at the same time, if a prosecutor in this situation, the Manhattan District Attorney, wanted to pursue that, he is more than likely, as we've seen by what we've been reading, he's more than likely to do that.
Okay, so it's stepping stone to full-blown trial.
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. In probable cause, though, Counselor, I know you've been involved in a lot of this. Very subjective, is it not?
Well, probable cause, yeah, it is. It's 51%, basically, is how the courts describe it. It's more than not.
Okay.
If I can, that's a good legal answer to you. It's something going to occur probably more than it's not going to occur.
Okay, makes sense.
And so it's not that heavy of a burden. It's not the burden that we put on defendants who are, again, presumed innocent until proven guilty at trial, and that burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. Not beyond all doubt, not beyond a shadow of a doubt, but beyond a reasonable doubt. And it only takes one juror in that instance to acquit someone. And I think that's a great thing that we have in our system of justice. You have to have innocence until proven guilty. We've learned that from, that's why we set this country up, because we were not getting that in England.
Right. Well,
so
your explanation, by the way, was excellent. I appreciate that. But more importantly, my confidence that our system is sound is renewed. I'm concerned about the actors in the system, right?
Yeah, that's always a concern for sure. That's always a concern, especially when those actors who are wielding this prosecutorial power are elected officials.
Right.
And in this case, an elected official in New York is pursuing a former United States president who resides in Florida. And so, again, gets back to, you Manhattan District Attorney, have said your priorities are violent crime. You have said that you are not interested in going after nonviolent misdemeanors. Yet everything that you are doing with regard to this case contradicts what you have said to the public.
And consuming lots of resources out of his office.
Man, I can't
Incredible.
imagine. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it truly is a crazy deal.
But don't forget, Trump still has the investigation in Georgia by the Fulton County District Attorney, who's looking into election interference there. He's got the investigation of the special prosecutors into potential mishandling of classified documents, and, incitement of the January 6th riots as well.
And there's something going on at Mar-a-Lago as well,
yeah,
I seem to recall.
That's the special counsel investigation of the mishandling of the classified documents. The problem with that case is we also have, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, with issues of...
Correct.
But he had them locked in his garage, so I'm sure that's perfectly okay. His Corvette was protected, so everything's good.
It's the two-tier legal system that just agitates people, I being one of them. So here's a question. Let's suppose the grand jury convenes, gets back on schedule, and they vote, I guess it would be a vote, to indict.
It would. Mm-hmm.
All right. What happens to Donald Trump at that point?
So at that point, the indictment would be returned. It would be put under seal with the court. Arrest warrant would be put under seal with the court. In this case, what I think would happen is the district attorney's office would reach out to the attorneys for Donald Trump. They would try to arrange a date when Trump would come into the Manhattan district attorney's office. In the Manhattan district attorney's office, he would be fingerprinted. His picture would be taken like a mugshot, and he would have the paperwork that he would have to fill out as anyone who's been charged with a crime. At that point, in the Manhattan DA's office, normally what happens is that individual is then put in a jail cell, and he sits in the jail cell right beside the courtroom awaiting him to walk into the courtroom for his arraignment. From what I've read, that ain't going to happen. The Secret Service has protection over the President of the United States and former presidents of the United States. And in this case, what I would see is the Secret Service coordinating with the DA's office, coordinating with the court system and the security for the court system, and ensuring that Trump is brought in under tight security of the Secret Service and be brought in to the courtroom. At an initial appearance, an arraignment, the individual who's been charged would be, the judge would walk through the indictment with him, read it if the person wants it. He would be asked, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty? And in every situation, at that first appearance, the defendant pleads not guilty. Because he hasn't gotten any...
No reason not to, right?
He hasn't gotten any evidence from the prosecutor yet. He hasn't gotten any documents. He hasn't had a chance. Hadn't had his day in court.
No deals on the table or anything like that.
So this is the initial appearance.
Okay.
So at that point, the clock would start running for the prosecutor to hand over what's called discovery, basically all the evidence the prosecutor has. If you've seen My Cousin Vinny, Vinny was so excited when he asked the prosecutor for the evidence. He's like, sure, I'll give you all the evidence. He's like, yes, I got to win. Like, no, that's what you're entitled to under our rules. But and now going forward, New York has a backlog of cases. So he's not going to be put on trial for he's not going to be put on trial for a year. At
he
least.
wouldn't get any special priority, right?
No, I don't think he would.
Okay.
But again, I wouldn't think he'd be prosecuted for a misdemeanor that's 7 years old of falsifying business records. So who knows what's going to happen in New York City? But that's kind of the process. I'll tell you, in the federal system, if any of those, let's take the special counsel cases, if they were to move forward and they were to get ready to indict Trump, the problem with that is next year is a presidential election year. And the Department of Justice has a policy that we don't interfere, DOJ doesn't interfere in elections.
Oh, okay.
So nothing, if it doesn't happen this year on the federal side, it's not going to happen next year. It would have to be 2025.
So they're literally racing the clock.
Yes, absolutely.
Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney, has been our guest. Thanks for coming in, Mike.
Thanks, Gerard. Appreciate it.
Coming right back. Half an hour left on Midday. Stay with